Jim did it fine, it just came right. Okay, next we have Carvel Collins. Carvel Collins. Let's give Carvel a hand, all right.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. I'm Carvel Collins. I've been a lawyer in Baltimore and have known Chris as a fellow lawyer in Baltimore and have worked with him throughout his legislative career in Annapolis. And what a privilege to have that interaction with Chris in both settings, dating back to the 1990s when we worked together on Republican Party matters. What I would like to say is what Chris has taught us about public service, about serving for the right reasons. And if there was a manual on how to be a public servant in the General Assembly, it would probably start with the first chapter that said something along the lines of, have a fulsome profession or career in any pursuit and bring all of that experience, bring all of that know-how, bring all of that insight to Annapolis and apply it every single day in the work of the General Assembly. And that is exactly what Chris West has done.
Yay.
For 40 years, he practiced law. He was an accomplished business lawyer in Baltimore. And then he arrived in Annapolis. And for all of those years in Annapolis, those 12 years serving, he continued to practice law and continued every day to apply those good lessons to the work that he did day in and day out. That's a great first chapter in a manual on how to be an exemplary public servant in the General Assembly. And then that manual could go on and have other chapters. And I think many of you would know what those chapters would say when you think about Chris. A chapter maybe on listening and learning early. Listening quietly, learning, mastering the subject matter, and then lawmaking. It makes for a much more effective lawmaker when he or she knows what they're doing, knows what they're talking about. Developing expertise. Well, Chris certainly did that. He served on 2 different committees in Annapolis, 2 very different committees, with very different, entirely different subject matter, mastered both areas, and applied those best ideas to the work that he did day in and day out. Learning and practicing the art of compromise. Senator Reedy also already mentioned a little something about this. Chris was set the standard for that. If there was any way that compromise could be crafted, Chris was on it. He would find that way. He would bring those parties together, regardless of political party, regardless of philosophical bent. He'd find a way to achieve that middle ground. That is a dying art in Annapolis. He would maintain constant, unwavering civility and respect for other people's opinion. That's another chapter in this manual. He did that every single day. And for those of us who knew Chris, he brought that with him to Annapolis. He already had that. But what he did was he never lost it. He never lost it. He applied it every day. It was always a civil debate, a civil conversation, even if disagreement was running high. He always found a way. The last chapter, I think, in a manual like this is about the transfer of power. In the tradition of George Washington, Chris is returning to civilian life after public service. He's making for a peaceful transfer of power. He's creating opportunities for others to serve without holding on too long to the reins of power. Think about that. Chris West is doing that right now, and that's what brings us together tonight, to celebrate this and his other exemplary accomplishments in public service to our state. So Chris, thank you for all that you've done. It means so much to all of us, and we all aspire to be like you.
And now Mike Galeazzo.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Carl, that was very beautiful. 250th anniversary. You made a great point about Chris. A lot of folks here I do know, and many of them I don't know. But let me begin by just saying just one thing about me. I spent my life following a simple formula. I do good things with good people for good reasons. And that's why I'm so proud to have had Chris West in my life, because he certainly fits with that motto. Everybody here, if they had this microphone, would be saying similar things. Chris, you're a gentleman. You're just an amazing individual. In every walk of life, and everything that you do it with a level of dignity that's so rare these days. And what that does, it empowers your friends. I mean, we love you, man, because you're the kind of guy that lets us know that God's on our side, quite frankly, because you emulate the respect and the dignity and the kindness and the principles and the values that we know that we want to be ourselves. So let me just end with this one point. I'm going to talk about a Democrat, Tip O'Neill. Everybody knows Tip O'Neill wrote a book and he talked about all politics is local. Well, if you didn't read the book, you may have missed this point that he was making. He talks about he was walking down the street in Boston, in his district, and somebody said, "That's my senator." And that was his point. Chris, that's my senator, Chris West. Thank you, Chris.
Wonderful, wonderful. Next is Al Mendelson.
Thank you for that round of applause. You know, it's always risky to follow lawyers, so I thank you, Mike, for stepping in between us. When I was a young Republican, and yes, in fact, I once was young, Chris pulled me aside and said, "Let's have lunch." And I don't know if you even remember this. It was when you were still downtown. And you talked to me about the way that you would handle the recount for Sour Bray along with Dick Bennett. And of course, this is when the phone chooses to go off. There we go. I apologize. And he said that I've got the right attitude, I've got the right intelligence, but it's time to actually figure out what I'm going to do. And I didn't actually know what he meant until he broke out some tabular forms. And this is back in the days of Lotus. You don't know what Lotus is. But it was the original spreadsheet, and he showed every precinct line by line. He said, "This is what you need to do, and if you want to be the head of the Young Republicans in Baltimore County and later in Maryland, you've got to understand what the precincts are and where they are and where you can actually make a difference, because you can't win everything, but you can't and you can't take anybody for granted, but you've got to focus on the squishy middle." And I've never forgotten that. I've never forgotten that, I guess it was 1988, somewhere thereabout, that you took that time. And I was glad several years later to say, "Hey, Chris, there's a delegate spot open. What do you say we make a race?" And he did, and here we are today. So thank you for a job well done, a life well served, for being my mentor all these years. And thank you, Ann, for putting up with me.
It does feel nice to be up here praising Ann as well, because it's not easy being with the 12 years that Chris has served. I thought we should give Ann a hand as well. A big round of applause. Serving this job is not easy on our families, and I think it's exciting. I know you're excited to be able to go and do some things, do some fun things in the wintertime also, not just in the summer. So, so very, very good. We have 2 more folks here. We have Steve Salomon.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, get behind. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. And boy, I was really trying to think back and rattle my brain, Chris, when I first met you. I still talk funny. I say coffee, how you doing, that kind of thing. I moved here from New Jersey in 1983, and the first thing I did was meet this guy by the name of Bob Ehrlich, who lived in my community of Mays Chapel Village. And when he ran for delegate, I ran his telephone banks. We actually had telephone banks back then. And he won. And then he went to Congress. And then, wow, governor. It's just incredible. That's where it started. And I believe we met during Bob's campaign as things went well. And then, what year were you party chairman?
94, 95.
Okay.
Wait a minute. Wait.
I've been in the employee benefit business for 40 years. I don't know if anybody remembers what happened in 1994. There was a guy by the name of Bill Clinton, and he came along with something called the Clinton Healthcare Plan that would have put me out of business. So I got involved in politics pretty damn quickly. And Chris was always listening to what I, as an insurance broker, what we needed in Annapolis. There was something called small group market reform with Casper Taylor. And there is still there, an entity called the Maryland Healthcare Commission, which regulated that before Obamacare came along. And through the trade association I belonged to, which I was active in, with our lobbyists and the members of our committee, we would always consult with Delegate Chris West when we needed to fight legislation like that. And he never let us down. Never. And boy, I thank you for that from the bottom of my heart. I was fortunate, I went on, Governor Ehrlich actually appointed me chairman of the Maryland Healthcare Commission in 2004, when we regulated small market reform. And that's when I really got to know Chris, because in the committees he was on, the commission interacted on the healthcare matters. So I just echo what everybody else said. A true public servant, somebody who always put his constituents first and was always willing to listen. Even if you disagreed with them, you could still go back another time and have a conversation about something else. So I hope one day we return to that kind of dialogue in Annapolis. And Senator West, thank you.
We have one more presenter before we hear from the man of honor. I thought I would take a commercial break here to introduce elected officials and candidates that are here with us now. Our last figure is a former elected official as well. So in addition to myself and Senator West, I'm going to go kind of down the line of who I've seen. I have former delegate Dan Moorheim. Let's hold our applause to the end. Former delegate Dan Moorheim from Baltimore County, and who both Chris and I serve with on the Health and Government Operations Committee. We have Delegate Rick Metzger from Eastern Baltimore County. We have County Commissioner from Carroll County, Susan Krebs. Is here, and she was with us in the House of Delegates, served in the House of Delegates. We have the Mayor of Hampstead, Chris Nevin. And now, I'm looking to see anybody else. We have, of course, candidate for State Senate here, Adam Wood, who we'll be talking with soon. And then finally, I think I got everybody except my last guest of honor, just making sure. I'd like to have former delegate and former secretary Jim Ports come to be our closing presenter to talk about our friend Chris.
All right, thank you, Justin. So, first of all, I think, where is Chris? Where did Chris go? Oh, okay. I thought he left when he heard I was going to talk. So Chris and I go way, way back in Dick Bennett days on Central Committee. Known Chris since around 1990, actually probably about 1988. And he was the attorney, and I want to tell two quick stories. One, I was running against a guy named Max Curran, who ran as J. Joseph Curran III in East Baltimore, and that was 1998. And I was 35 votes down, and we were counting ballots. Imagine that. Ballots in a Democrat area. And so Chris called me up and he says, "You're going to need a lawyer." I said, "I don't know, Chris, I can't afford a lawyer." Of course, he's an attorney, so he comes and he does it pro bono. So he was serving us, the Republican Party at the time, as the attorney, me as as my attorney for that ballot count. And who were we up against? We were up against Joe Curran, who signed in as representing Max Curran. Keep in mind, he's supposed to sign off on who wins the election, not represent his son. Okay? That's one. Two, who did he have represent him? A guy named Martin O'Malley. And this, I know this is going to stun everybody in this room, and I bet he remembers it like it was yesterday. But Martin O'Malley, there were, I don't know, like 265 or 300 and some Republican ballots. And Martin O'Malley went through every single one of them. And he tried to deny every single one but one, because he was saying he was being bipartisan. And so Chris says, wait a minute here.
Did he try to tax those ballots?
No, he taxed the rain. But so Chris says, wait a minute here. Why are we denying these ballots? And then he went through, and of course, all of them were accepted, and we won the election and beat Max Curran in East Baltimore. That's one. But it was because of Chris and his representation that we're able to hold on to that seat, my seat, along with Al Redmond. But I'm going to tell you, another story he tells. So there must be a theme with Chris, because I've heard a couple times he takes you to lunch. So he was having some problems. He also was a member of the Timonium Fairgrounds. He helped out with the fairgrounds, and he calls me up. He says, the MTA, the light rail, it's eroding our road, and our road's starting to collapse. That's going around the Timonium Fairgrounds. And he talked to the bureaucrats, and bureaucrats said, "Oh no, it's your rain that's coming down and doing this and eroding the area." So he got frustrated, calls me up. I was deputy secretary at the time, and he calls me up and he says, "Let's go have lunch." That was the first thing. He feeds you first before he goes for the jugular. And then he says, "Okay, let's go over to Timonium Fairgrounds." So he called me because he says I'm hands-on. But little do you know that he's also hands-on. And you know how he is as a senator, you know how he is as an attorney, but I bet you didn't know he knew how to use a level. He brings a level and says, "Look at this road." And of course, you look at the road and like, yeah, the bubble's going the other way. I got it. I get it, Chris. The bubble's going the other way. And so I said, okay, the bureaucrats are wrong. It's our problem. We're going to fix it. He was so excited. And I know he still tells that story today because he mentioned it to some people earlier. But I tell you what, you look around this room, and I can't get over like Steve and Carmel and wait a minute, where is it? Al and where is he? Jim. Jim, yeah. You look around, we were all in our 30s. know? And now Chris is retiring. So the last thing I'll say is, well, first of all, thank you, Chris, for all that you've done over probably 40 some years to help not just the Republican Party, but the state of Maryland. And I'll leave it with this: go West.
Sure. I actually have a second spontaneous speaker, so why don't you go first, and then I'll have the last spontaneous speaker.
Well, as you can see, there are more people who want to say something about Chris than even the people who signed up or were asked to. I've known Chris since 1965. And I had the pleasure of knowing Chris's mom, knowing Chris's dad, his brother, and I have to tell you, the values that Chris embodies and the values that he shares with everybody else, not by preaching but by power of example, come from those deep roots. His wonderful parents, his brother showed the same great influence, and when Chris was a teenager, he was just as dependable, honest, of equally good character, notwithstanding, all the foibles of adolescence. Chris was always reliable and a person of integrity, and that, to my mind, was a reason that I always urged Chris to go into public service. So I thought Chris was almost too good for this world, but practical and smart and sensible so that he could be in this world while elevating the rest of us through the power of his example. I must say that because Chris doesn't have an ego, he's humble, modest, as you know, unassuming. He didn't just jump into politics from the get-go. He was active in the party, behind the scenes, as general counsel, etc. But with Chris, it's never about him. It's about you, or the rest of us. And I must say, I was inspired by Chris, even though I was a close friend, and you don't normally get inspired by your close friends, you're familiar and so forth. But even while we were buddies, I found his example inspiring. And I say this as a Democrat. I've been bipartisan vigorously for my entire life. I don't really think of myself as a Democrat as much as someone who's tended to be on that side of the aisle more often than not. But I have been more bipartisan by far in working with the US Congress and in the executive branch, working with stakeholders on the Hillary Clinton healthcare reform, task force on Obamacare, on retirement, other employee benefits, because of Chris. I would have been that way anyway, but it helped just to have the example and the good influence of my friend Chris, thinking, what would Chris do in this divisive, fractious, hot-tempered situation? He'd find, as you said, and as many of you very eloquently said, he'd find the middle ground. He'd find the common values that we share and be smart and creative about working that into a solution. So I must say that I continue to be grateful to Chris for the great influence that he's had on me, and I think on everybody who's known him. Chris earned our trust, and so we all trust. Chris, he earned our admiration, respect. So we all respect Chris. And I must say, you know, he's earned our love, and everybody loves Chris. So thank you very much.
Our last one. Delegate Rick Metzger wanted to say a couple words.
Yeah, I know.
Real quick, boy, what a great list of speakers and things that I've heard coming in. By the way, we have Mr. Stuart Sims somewhere around here, the attorney from Baltimore City. God bless him. What a joy it was to serve with Chris. Where did he go? There he is, there's the man. What a joy it was to come into the House of Delegates in 2000, November 14, with Chris West. And I need to say that when we all got sworn in and the calmness of the room settled in, I looked around the room and I thought, wonder where these people come from. And by that, I started questioning people. And I found out that we have Dr. Morheim, who was a ER doctor. We had pilots from Southwest Airlines. We had plastic surgeons who did during COVID, did a Zoom call while she's doing surgery on somebody. True story. That's the actual fact. We had attorneys and lawyers, and I was thrilled to death when I was offered to go to the, let me just backtrack. Michael Bush called me and he said, I need you to do me a favor. And I said, what's that? He said, I need you to go to HGO. He said, you're in Ways and Means, and he said, you're either for tax increases or you're not, and I know you're not for tax increases. I said, no. He said, I need somebody to go to HGO. And when I went to HGO, one of the first persons I got to sit next to was Chris West. And what a joy it was to learn from him. And dear Delegate Krebs, to listen to what kind of questions are we, what kind of answers are we trying to, what kind of problem are we trying to create? That was it. And to listen to Chris, the questioning. And Chris always said it was never a dumb question. It was always, if you had a question, you needed to ask it. And it was very thorough in research. And I honored him. And one of the things, he paid me a huge compliment, is that my first session, at the end, he said he wrote in his end of session letter, he said he wrote a story about a bill that I had, and that has really affected me even to this day. So, Chris, I want you to know that Delegate Rick Metzger will look you in the eyes and tell you I love you and I honor you, and what a night it is. Let's celebrate Chris West tonight. God bless you.
And we're going to hear from, if he's willing, the man of the hour. This is your mic, Senator Chris West. Come on up.
Woo! Go, Chris. Yes.
We really appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, I will say, normally I have some prepared remarks. I have made no plans for what I'm going to say tonight, because I didn't know what people were going to say about me. I thought it was going to be a roast, like one of those Dean Martin roasts. I was kept waiting for people to tell stories that are going to embarrass me, but it didn't happen. So that's great. First person I have to mention is my wife, Ann, who's sitting over here. She encouraged me to run 13 years ago actually, because I spent 2 years running the first time, and did without me for 12 consecutive winters, 90 days each winter, and it was tough on her. So I'm now going to join her, and we'll have some fun next winter, and we probably will not be in Baltimore the entire winter. My son Christopher is also with us. The elected officials and former elected officials have already been mentioned. Before I go on, there is a candidate here tonight who I want to bring up. The money from this evening's event is not going to me. I've closed my campaign account down. So it now has a zero balance, and I don't intend to enhance that balance by so much as a penny, because I'd have to reopen the bank account. So the money for this evening's event is all going to Adam Wood, who is the person I hope succeeds me. Adam, would you come up and just take a couple of minutes to tell people who you are and why you're running?
Very briefly. So, for
the last 3 years, I've served as the executive director of the Maryland Republican Party. That may sound familiar. Yes. Since somebody else had that job as well. So, yes. So Chris is one of the folks that approached me to run for state senate to replace him, and I have to say it's pretty intimidating because those are very big shoes to fill. So one of the things that I respect the most about Chris, because this is about him tonight, is his ability to reach across the aisle and find solutions. And I've always said, and Nick Lee can attest to this, is I love campaigning, but I love the policy side because the whole goal is to actually find solutions. And I've said countless times over the last few weeks when I was campaigning is, I don't care, a solution is a solution is a solution is a solution. And if it comes from a Democrat, it comes from a Republican, I don't care. In fact, when I worked on the Hill for about 10 years, we passed a lot of legislation. In fact, I ran one of the most productive legislative shops on the House side outside of leadership. And we passed a lot of legislation with, you might know Sheila Jackson Lee, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So some of the most far left Democrats you can imagine, we could still find a middle ground. We could still find solutions. We passed legislation to increase access to breast cancer screenings, improve our healthcare system, kind of roll back some of the Obamacare stuff. It was mainly healthcare related. But point is, a solution is a solution is a solution. This man knows it better than anybody that I've ever known, and I hope to get your support in the Senate race. June 23rd is the primary. If you're not a registered Republican, I hope to get your vote in the general. But please help me in filling such big shoes. And I appreciate you all being here honoring such a great man.
I'm just going to finish up. I'm guest here this evening. I just want to say that Adam sort of hit that nail right on the head. When I got elected in 2014, I quickly realized there are two ways you can act as a Republican down in Annapolis. You can stand on the sidelines and just throw rocks. And there are lots of things you can throw rocks at. And you can go on social media and be very voluble and engage in personal attacks. You can play that game, and that doesn't get you anywhere. At the end of your tenure, nobody's going to remember you were there because you didn't really make a ripple in the pond. Or you can plunge in and really try to do the work and be a serious legislator and affect public policy. And so early on, that's what I decided my role was going to be. And I've talked to Adam about it. I think he agrees with me on this. So if you go back and look at the tapes, and you can watch the tapes of every single hearing that I participated in, and every single floor session that I sat in, you will find that in every hearing, when I conclude talking to the witness, and I was by far the most active questioner on my committee, the Judicial Proceedings Committee in the State Senate, at the end, I could be seething inside. How can he possibly say that? I can't believe he thinks that would be intelligent public policy. But my final words to him were, thank you very much for your answers to my questions, which is the civil way that people, human beings, interact with each other. It's so important in this day and age when people are so much at odds, and especially when there's such rancorous partisanship, to people to go back to first principles and to treat our fellow human beings. We're all creatures under God's heaven. Nobody's better than anybody else. We all need to pay attention. We need to listen. We need to respond intelligently to what other people are saying. We cannot treat each other with disdain or disrespect. And so I've always held, that's the approach that I've followed for 12 years down in Annapolis. And I'm sure Adam will take the same approach when he gets down there. So with that, I guess I should say thank you to everybody so much for coming this evening. It was wonderful to be honored in this way. And what a glorious evening we've had. And thank you, Justin.
Yeah, good. Woo! That's good. Bravo.